So that's what's new in PERMA. So what we've done so far, with about 15 minutes to go, is I've defined well-being for you as PERMA. I've said it's measurable, both by questionnaire, but very interestingly by social media. I've taken you through a little of the science on PER, M&A, all of which suggests that the lottery study was wrong, that you can lastingly build PERMA. And now I want to ask the question, since Tech Milenio has said, let's do this for an entire university, how plausible is it that it can be done in large units and not just with individuals? And the answer is, I think, very plausible. So there are, your president and I were last week in England at the first meeting of Positive Education, the leading headmasters and policy people who are doing positive education in the world. And there are several hundred secondary schools around the world who are doing positive education, where positive education means exactly what we're talking about today. Keeping our tradition of teaching knowledge, but in addition, teaching PERMA to the students. And I'll just give you just some of many results that occur. So this is a study that we spent about $2.5 million on with the Department of Education of the United States. We took ninth graders, 14-year-old kids, and half of the classes, these were literature classes. Half the classes are literature as normal, and half the classes are literature with positive psychology. So these kids read Lord of the Flies, Romeo and Juliet, The Scarlet Letter, Macbeth, one tragedy after another. And in literature with positive psychology, when they read Lord of the Flies, they get 80 minutes on kindness and what's known about the science of kindness and what its effects are. And then they're assigned by next Wednesday to do 3 kind acts. So they discuss the literature in terms of positive psychology, the characters in terms of strengths, and they get assignments. And this goes on for a year. And so what's measured here is over the rest of their high school career, how are they doing? And this is done blindly, so the raters and the teachers don't know whether or not they had literature with positive psychology or without. And this is social skills. The kids who have had positive psychology are kinder, they're more cooperative, they have more self-control. And their grades are higher. And they write better. It turns out there are no effects in the honors group. That's grade inflation, everyone gets an A. But for ordinary kids, there are significant effects on achievement. And so that's very important about the synergy between achievement and PERMA. Reason to believe that young people, the people you have for the 4 years here at a formative time in their life, we've just taught them knowledge. And when I think about my schooling and all the knowledge that I allegedly had, I almost never go back to the things I learned and use it now. But if we teach about well-being, about fulfillment, about PERMA, these are things we use all the time in life. So these 4 years that you have are precious for the teaching, not only of knowledge, but of PERMA. The largest endeavor that's occurred is the entire United States Army. So 5 years ago, I was called to the Pentagon by the Chief of Staff, George Casey. And General Casey, it's a meeting of the General Staff, said to me, suicide, post-traumatic stress disorder, panic, depression, anxiety, divorce, substance abuse. what does positive psychology say about that, Dr. Seligman? And so I said, sir, it's like combat in Iraq, death of a child, is bell-shaped. And on the left-hand side of the bell, you have people whose lives are ruined by combat or death of someone they loved. And you've just described 7 or 8 of what people in the Army are experiencing. But not to be forgotten is the great middle. And the great middle is called resilience. And these are people who go through a tough time in combat, but 3 months later, by our psychological indices, are back where they were before combat had occurred. And on the right-hand side is what's called post-traumatic growth. And this is what is not well publicized, but it is the normal response of people to awful events. These are people who often go through a terrible time in combat. But a year later, by our psychological and physical measures, they're stronger than they were than before combat occurred. So my suggestion to you, General, is to move the entire distribution toward post-traumatic growth. And whereupon General Casey did 2 remarkable things, which I'll remember till my dying day. The first was he said, unlike what we have to do, in which we try to convince our colleagues to have a university based on positive psychology, he ordered that from that day forward, he would create an army that was just as psychologically fit as physically fit, and he allocated about $125 million to do it. And then the second thing he did was he said, we've read your work on positive education, Dr. Seligman, and we see that you train teachers in the skills of resilience. They learn resilience and positive psychology in their own lives, and then they teach it to students, and you measure the students. He says, well, that's the Army model. We have 40,000 teachers in the Army. And I said, really? He said, yeah, the drill sergeants. So your job, Dr. Seligman, will be to train all the drill sergeants in the Army on positive psychology and resilience, and they will then train the 1.1 million soldiers, and we will measure whether or not this works. So since that time, every month, 180 drill sergeants come to the University of Pennsylvania, and my faculty teaches them the skills that will be taught in Margarita's Masters of Applied Positive Psychology course. We graduated our 18,000th drill sergeant last month. They have been training the troops, and now we have a considerable amount, and the Army's measuring this very carefully. And here's the sort of data that has been generated by it. These are soldiers who go to Iraq and Afghanistan. So on the right-hand side are measures of what happens during Iraq and Afghanistan and what happens after. And on the left-hand side is before. And these are soldiers who have had one teacher of positive psychology in their battalion. And what you find is this is a positive coping, that the soldiers who have been through some resilience training do better in deployment and after deployment. Those that have not, in general, do worse. And recently, the Army published technical report number 5 that showed that positive psychology, training in positive psychology for the soldiers halved the rate of substance abuse, and there was a 12% lower rate if you lump together post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, and depressive disorders. So this kind of training has been effective on a wide scale.